वाहेगुरु 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 वाहेगुरु.
Harjit, are we okay to start talking about symbology and leadership now?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, brilliant. So we will start with some symbols of leadership, which I'm sure you will be very familiar with, and we'll just, see what our thoughts are on these. So first of all, what I'd like to talk about is Maharaja Ranjit Singh. This symbol, it's his statue that was erected in Lahore. So Maharaja Ranjit Singh, the title of Singh and Gaur that were bestowed on us by Guru Gobind Singh Ji. So when I hear of leaders with the title Singh, I feel a kind of connectedness with them. I feel that I'm part of the same family, the same heritage at least. And then we have the symbol in the middle, the symbol of Ekamgar, which represents oneness. And that reminds me of the interconnectedness of all of life, regardless of whether it's human life, animal life, plant life. There's that oneness, this kind of web of life that embraces everyone and everything, and probably includes the galaxies as well. So it's that kind of wide-ranging, unknowable, unfathomable extent of that vastness, of that oneness. And then the third image is the symbolic image of Guru Hargobind, our sixth Guru, who was able to negotiate the release from prison of 52 Maharajas. So these were not Sikh Maharajas, they were Hindu Maharajas, and he negotiated for their release regardless of whether he felt a kinship with them or, whether they were different. I'm sure like maybe even if they were arch enemies, he may have tried to persuade to negotiate their release because they were unfairly imprisoned. So here we have symbols of both kinship, like a sense of kind of belonging to the other, and then that transcendent oneness where we're part of something much bigger than ourselves, maybe, things that we're not even consciously aware of. And that humanitarianism, this encouragement, this advocacy of embracing everyone, regardless of who they are, regardless of whether they're part of your family, whether they are part of your community. It's based on, working for justice. So if somebody is treated unfairly, we would be upset about someone being treated unfairly, regardless of whether they are akin to us or whether they are a diverse person. So in leadership, these qualities of kinship and oneness and this sense of embracing a wide range of people. We can't simply be leading our own family. I suppose leadership starts with leadership within our families, but then when we're in the workplace, it's not only those who are similar to us. How do we navigate this space where we want to be in a position of leadership where we're embraced by a diverse range of people?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. It's interesting because I think it's the approach to your leadership. You can either think of it as leading the way, as in you're the person dividing and conquering, or you can take it as with like the symbols, you are an equal to them. You are leading the way by example. You're leading the way by being one. And that's definitely my take on leadership is I can definitely lead, but I will lead with you. I will not lead for you. So I think a lot of that is very symbolic in those images that you showed just earlier. Is just that key is, how do you choose to lead? Do you choose to lead as an equal, looking at fairness, or do you choose to just be the very opposite, which is you lead by ego? So
it's interesting that you mentioned the divide and rule concept, because we don't, that's kind of very alien to us, isn't it? I never hear of Sikh lead well. Having said that, you know, there are, of course, we're human beings, and we have all sorts of, we can't really generalize, we can't stereotype, but it's not a form of leadership that we would overtly advocate, even though unconsciously we may be seen to be divisive. I don't think we set out to be, do we?
Exactly.
So this Maharaja Ranjit Singh, he was able to bring together a diverse range of communities, the Muslims, the Hindus, the Sikhs, and also the Christians. And he was able to govern and empower all of them to become literate. You know, I think in his time, there was a very high rate of literacy amongst the masses. It wasn't only the elites that were educated, it was education became available to the general masses. And so he was able to raise the standards of living for all, regardless of whether they were similar to him or whether they were very different to him.
Yeah, absolutely.
So in your workplace, I know that, you know, you say that you would seek to lead through consensus, but what about others? You know, like, do you feel that others embrace your leadership regardless of whether they feel a kind of kinship to you or whether they think you're very different to them? Have you had challenges where people see you as being different and therefore not as trustworthy as someone who is similar to themselves?
To be honest, I've had some challenges for sure, but not in the respect that they didn't trust me. They may have had a difference in opinion, and that's okay, but I want to ensure, I'm actually glad to have ensured that they felt they had a safe space to voice their difference in opinion. Whether we chose to take that piece of advice or their criticism or their differences in opinion to move forward in a project. But I think the biggest thing is that ensuring that they felt like they had a safe space to be able to voice their opinion, because they are equal. It doesn't mean that your opinion has to be the same as anybody else or a consensus. And I think when I said what I prefer to lead with and not for, is that is being seen as one of them. We are all in this together. We may have different roles, but at the end, our end result is going to be coming from the team, a team as a whole, not a single person. And everyone has a right to that opinion. So, so yes, there's challenges, but I think more in the perspective of being able to feel safe enough to voice their opinions within a space.
And I think through Sikhi, the role of the Panj Pyare, where Guru Gobind Singh Ji, he was, I think he advocated that leadership through consensus, because the Panj Pyare were given the authority to make decisions, and, you know, to have 5 people in a team, the decision maker. So it's not just one person who makes the decision, it's through consensus. And, you know, if there were only 4 people, you might have 2 people who have one opinion and you have another 2 who have a very different opinion. But if you've got the 5th person there, the 5th person there will kind of like try and balance things out so that they hear both sides, and then they can choose.
Yeah, and then the group makes the choice. Absolutely. Which I think, values-based wise, that's exactly what we've been taught through history, through religion. Maybe not so much this culture, but yes.
I suppose if our objective in leadership is to serve, then, you know, we wouldn't adopt strategies such as divide and rule, because it just doesn't make sense, does it?
It never does. It never has. It never has resulted in anything that positive when you do a divide and conquer. Unless you're dividing and conquering, separating tasks out to manage your workload. But yeah, it needs to be the team coming together as a whole.
Yeah. Okay. So now let me ask you about these symbols of Sikhi that are behaviors. So symbolically, when we go to the Gurdwara, we have langar, and Guru Nanak Dev Ji created this system of langar and seva. You know, he advocated for it, and in those times it was this act of sitting together and eating together, regardless of your status, regardless of your, the walk of life, regardless of whether you were from a high caste or a low caste, the willingness to sit down and eat together with others, that kind of advocated egalitarianism. And then we have Guru Gobind Singh Ji, who had followers from all walks of life who were riding with him. And in those days, it was taboo. I think it still is actually for some castes in India to ride on horses, because they are rising above their station. I might be wrong about this, but this is my impression, that for some castes, that kind of oppressive societal structure still exist, where it's not okay for everyone to behave in a way that as though they are free, as though they are, they could be rulers. It's like only the ruling class that were allowed to ride horses. And then we have Mai Bago, who led 40 warriors back into battle. And in terms of gender, there was it didn't make any difference whether she was, what her gender was. She was still the leader, leading these 40 warriors back into battle with against the Mughals. And so here we've got symbols of egalitarianisms, and we've got symbols of people breaking through the social order, breaking through the status quo, and fighting for their liberation, fighting for their freedom. So in terms of leadership, how do we navigate this sense of being equal and being egalitarian, leading by consensus, as though no one is superior to the other, and at the same time being willing to rise above our station and to be ambitious and to break through the barriers that we may feel oppressed by? What are your thoughts on this?
I think it's always a challenge in leadership for a variety of people. Again, it becomes down to some of the values that you have within yourself, which ultimately does feed your leadership style. I think one of the biggest things that any leader can do is actually highlight what is everyone's strengths in the room? What are our differences in the room? Because all of those differences and those strengths actually feed in to make a better team. They feed in to support each other, because we all have a variety of perspectives. But also, like an example, one of the things that we do, or I've done, and I've done as part of a team member, being a team member as well, is we play this hat game. So everyone, fills out a little online quiz. It tells them the color of hat that they most likely are to wear. Black being maybe more critical, more logical, pragmatic, yellow being a little optimistic, and viewing things a little differently. And coming together,
thinking hats, is it? DeBono's 6 thinking hats.
Yes, the 6 thinking hats, exactly. Mm-hmm. And that just even right in the beginning of, as you're building your teams, helps everyone to identify, okay, well, our perspectives are so different, but we're going to be able to come together and look at the pieces of the puzzle and put these things together. But for doing that, we might want to build it different ways, because the way our perspectives are going to be very different, and learning how to respect that. So using things like games to be able to demonstrate to the teams are really how different we are. But at the end of the day, we're still equal. We're still here doing the same job. We're still here getting to the same objective. So I think it's very important to be able to actually say, this person might be able to help me critically think through something that I can't, has become a barrier to me. Let me reach out to that person on my team. So being able to identify those things early on in the team can actually really help. And I think looking at our values, like with Mike Bago, it doesn't matter what gender you are. It doesn't matter. It matters is that drive within you, and it matters how you can motivate the other people on your team.
Yes, and also there's a time and place for everything, because like with the 6 thinking hats, we're not always wearing the black hat. Sometimes we can wear the red hat. Sometimes it depends on the context. We might wear the yellow hat because we feel really optimistic at this point in time. And so, yes, we are, there is diversity, and we can always empathize. You know, somebody's kind of like got a very negative view about a particular project and whatever, we can empathize with their hesitancy, because in another situation, we know what it feels like when everyone else is raving about something and we don't agree with it. So we all, you know, even though in a particular context, we may come across as being very black hat type or red hat type or whatever, we know that we can't pigeonhole people into these little boxes, because everyone is diverse, and at the same time, we're the same as well, because depending on the context, we might behave in a very different way.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So let's look at these symbols now. The Gurmukhi script, the Nishan Sahib, and the Khanda. So when Guru Nanak Dev Ji and Guru Angad Dev Ji, the first 2 gurus, they created the Gurmukhi script for us so we could read Gurbani in the language that it was spoken in, because at that time there wasn't a written script for the dialect that was spoken by Guru Nanak Dev Ji. And they created the Gurmukhi, and they could have used existing scripts because Sanskrit existed, Farsi existed, Arabic existed, but no, they created a new script. So that's like an example of innovation. Something didn't exist, and so we create something that will serve people to become literate, because at that time, most people, if they had an education, they were elite. It wasn't the masses that had an education, but Gurmukhi enabled the masses to become literate. And then we have the Nishan Sahib, which is a symbol of our heritage. It's like the claim to our rights in a Gurdwara, that we have won the right to behave according to our own values in that sacred space. And the Khanda, which represents the swords of Miri and Biri, the political and the worldly life, and the double-edged sword of justice and righteousness. So all of these symbols together, in terms of leadership, we need to be kind of true to our heritage in order to gain the confidence that we need, you know, the self-esteem that is kind of nurtured by our heritage. And then we need to be creative and innovative and take right actions. You know, without any action, we can't really say that there has been any leadership. There has to be some sort of action that takes place. So what are your thoughts on this, about leadership in an organization based on these concepts?
I mean, I think that within an organization, like you said, without action, there is no leadership. And part of that leadership is to be able to bring out innovation within your team, creativity within your team. So one of the projects that I'm working on right now is quite innovative for healthcare. And our team lives in a bubble of ambiguity. And how do we create creativity within that, while making our own kind of the product our own, or the project our own. So I think that's one of the things that we absolutely need to be able to do, and that we take forward from knowing that there are going to be a lot of barriers and challenges, especially when you innovate. Like when there was education around Gurmukhi, it didn't come easy.
Mm.
Right? It did not. It was going to be challenges amongst who's going to learn, who's going to have access to it. And whereas Gurmukhi was meant to be access to all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And as you said, you know, Sanskrit was for the elite.
That's right. And Farsi was for the elite as well.
Exactly. So being able to create something that has equal values, has access for everybody, and using that creativity and to break down any barriers. I think that's a huge value in what we're taught, and what in those images that you've shown, and making sure that it's a fair process.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big thing, is making sure that it is a fair process.
And so yeah, so innovation, it's about creating tools, creating systems, creating products that will contribute to the enhancement of society, and in
And
particular
accessibility.
masses. Go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, I said and accessibility for the
Yeah.
mass,
Mhm.
right? It needs to be easy. It needs to be accessible. It needs to be available to everybody. It shouldn't just be for a certain population.
And I think that this is why I love social media, in the sense that it allows us to share with all over. You know, I wouldn't be speaking with you here now if it wasn't for the social media platforms. And I think that kind of, it's the underlying concept of sharing, you know, creating platforms where people are allowed to express their voices. So, but underlying all of that, it's this whole thing about sharing things rather than copywriting things, you know, rather than kind of thinking this is just for me, or, you know, this is just for me to make profit. If it's like, if it's going to add value to the world, it's like, why wouldn't we want to share it, you know?
Absolutely. There's no I see value in sharing and not reinventing the wheel where somebody else can build, as long as it stays accessible, you know, and it's used to enhance other people's learning. Absolutely, I will share away, and I think that's important.
And that sharing, it's like linked to the concept of oneness, isn't it? When we share, it's like, if we think about all of life being like a web of interconnectedness, we share, it's probably going to come back to us somehow, you know, through that web of life.
Yeah, absolutely. There's always the benefit of enhancing somebody else's education and awareness as well. It's not going to do us any harm.
Mhm.
Well, hopefully it doesn't do anyone any harm, but sharing that positive message, sharing that education, absolutely. I mean, it's only going to help everybody move forward. So I don't see the issue in that, unless of course for monetary gain. That's where people tend not to share.
Mhm. Yes. And then there's that thing about heritage, you know, that I find that the more I learn about my own heritage, the more confident I have become. Because well, growing up, I didn't know very much about my own heritage, apart from what my family told me, apart from what my small community, I grew up in a small Sikh community. So what I learned from my small community, that was it. I didn't have an education in my own heritage, and that kind of not seeing myself in the history that I was taught, that felt disempowering to an extent that at the age of 14, I didn't want to study history anymore. I chose not to study history because I didn't like what they were teaching me in history. It didn't portray people who were like me in a very positive way. So heritage, it's part, you know, in terms of our leadership, we need to have strong roots to stand, you know, to stand our ground, and to feel that we have the strength, you know, to, and the faith, I suppose, you know, because we have a lot of strength that comes from our faith, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think you nailed it right there when you said it's the roots, right? So for me, I've been very, very fortunate that I've been brought up in a very spiritual home, where my paternal grandfather was a huge leader in spirituality. It just was a grounded, good, great person. Same thing with both my parents, very spiritual. So for me, growing up, I've always known my heritage, um, and really the value of the spirituality versus the cultural norms was higher in my household. So growing up, that's definitely what gave me confidence, because that's what I believe. Like the oneness, the when you lead with others. You know, we're all together in this. We may be in different boats in this ocean, but we're in this together. We have a life. Everyone that you connect with for a reason. Maybe it's to enhance their education of some sort, or maybe it's to enhance our own. You know, we're always learning and we're growing beings. So that piece is definitely something that I take with me anywhere I go.
Mm-hmm. That's wonderful. Yeah, you are very fortunate, because I know that there are a lot of people like myself who've grown up in the UK, and now they are asking questions. Why did we learn X, Y, and Z through our education? And now they're writing books. So, you know, there is a time and place for everything. Sometimes it can take decades to realize what we're actually missing. So, you know, so the roots, you know, I suppose in terms of adapting to a new environment, in terms of adapting to a new country, there has to be a sense of integration. But sometimes with that integration, it can be quite easy for people to lose themselves through that integration.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and it depends on, you know, timing, it depends on everything. And if you look at, you know, the early settlers in BC, they have faced numerous challenges. But still, they erected a gurdwara out in Vancouver, you know, one of the oldest. So there's barriers regardless, and it's to keep with their heritage and our roots and our values that we learn and we cherish and we treasure, and making the mark to say, yes, we believe in an equal society and the right to practice what you preach, essentially. So
Yeah. And the kanda with the mirim biri, you know, like for some people, they think that even going to the Gurdwara, you know, they don't like it when people make political speeches, and they think it's a place where they just want to go and feel peace. And how do you navigate this thing of like that there is politics and spirituality as well in terms of leadership, you know, because leadership, in terms of values-based leadership, there is the spiritual driving forces that are internal, that are inherent and partly instinctual, and then there are the outcomes that we need to strive for in the material world. So how do we navigate this kind of harmony between the spiritual drivers and the material drivers?
that's a hard question to answer, because it's definitely one I'm struggling with at the very moment, with deliverables that I have to meet within a month, and looking at the values of my team and where they are at from, I guess, not spirituality, but a place where they need to complete their work and not feel overwhelmed, and they require balance. So I think this is an ongoing struggle, no matter where you are, whether it be at the Gurdwara or whether it would be within your workplace. But it's an ongoing struggle within your values and the demand of the outside world, or the politics within the workplace. I think, though, our values help to, at least for me, help me to decide, to be able to step back and actually look at the situation and look at it from a balanced perspective. What are the political things that must be done? There are things that are hard cut that we cannot negotiate. What are the things that can be negotiable? And if something really goes against my values, what is it that I need to identify that's going against my value, and how do I need to rectify that? And if there is no way for me to rectify that, then, you know, where do I take this next, and figuring those next steps out, whether it be taking it forward to more people. And that's essentially what the Mirabi is like about, it's that balance between your faith and the politics between it, and where do you need to stand up.
Mm-hmm. That's right. And as you remind me of Kirt Kamau, you know, the principle of Sikhi, that if it's a righteous act that you want, the force will, the inner kind of drive to get things done will come naturally, or come easily, and things will get done in the right time, in the right place, because you've taken the right action in alignment with your values. And sometimes when there is that lack of alignment with our values and what we're, you know, what the outcomes are, that's when it can become more complex and challenging.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, wonderful. Well, Harjit, I've really appreciated your time today and this conversation. I can hear your dog seeking your attention now, so I will let you go. So thank you very much. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Thank you so much.
Waheguru, Waheguru, Waheguru. ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ